Hey, is this thing on? Are we recording? Can I get a tech person? Oh, for the love of EdTech. All right, joining us today is Jon Goga, who is creator of Brainy Spinach Math. And so we're really excited to have you, Jon. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so I'm just going to let you take it and explain to us, I guess, kind of what you do with Brainy Spinach Math.
So, I mean, if I was to summarize everything that I do, it would be providing live math courses through the gamification of math itself, specifically on Roblox, as in the games that I use are on Roblox. And so the first half of a given session within my classes would be kind of going over the math, the content that we're working on. So, for example, times tables or whatever else it may be. And then the second half is playing the games with similar content or exactly the same content, especially when it comes to the times tables, and practicing what's been taught in a fun and engaging way.
Okay, so with your business, the Brainy Spinach, I'm just trying to get an idea of how it all works. So does a student sign up?
Yeah. So I'm kind of in the middle of like a transition in what I'm doing with my business. So up until recently, I've been doing all of my courses on Tutorful, which is basically a website similar to OutSchool. Don't know if you've heard of OutSchool before. But it's a UK-based one only, Tutorful. So they're trying to go off on a kind of a tangent similar to OutSchool, where they have classes on their platform, not just educational ones, but fun ones as well. And so my content they quite like the idea of, because it's combining both. It's effectively edutainment when it comes to the gaming side, and
I like that word.
It's I only found out recently that it's actually its own category on YouTube, which is great.
Wow. I didn't know that.
So it's really good. So I started off first with these classes on Tutorful, and so I started off with them, and then realized that a lot of my students, a lot of the people that wanted to be my students anyway, were based in the US or Canada or outside of the UK, and they couldn't sign up through there, especially because Roblox is obviously huge over on across the pond. It's pretty big here as well, but like its biggest following is the Americas. And so I realized I needed to basically broaden my horizons, and so I went to OutSchool, and OutSchool for some reason didn't want me to have my classes on there. They just completely shut that down. No idea why.
Really?
Yeah, it was surprising. So I decided to just go it myself, and I'm making my own website. Hopefully will be live within the week. And so there from my website, I'd be able to take on students from anywhere in the world, as long as the time zone fits. So I'm putting on my classes in the evenings and late at night for myself, but it would fit, the American time zones, EST and beyond better, basically. So that's effectively how people find my courses. It's on brainyspinach.com when their website's ready. But if they're UK based, then it's on Tutorful still, because Tutorful's a great website. I'm loving working with them.
So I'm curious, is your background technology, like computer science, or is it education? Like, how did you get involved with teaching math?
Yeah. So no, I've got a few years experience in schools as a SEND teaching assistant.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if SEND transfers over to the US, but it's basically special educational needs and disabilities.
Oh, okay.
So that kind of umbrella term for anything, from autism to ADHD to Down syndrome, all sorts of conditions. And I would go in there and I'd work with them, one-to-one or a group basis. And because of that, I'd often find that I'm working with autistic children, and typically from that, young boys. What I found was that a lot of them absolutely adored Roblox and Minecraft, but Roblox is becoming more and more of a thing for them as well, as I noticed. And I didn't really know much about Roblox. I certainly always been a gamer, a huge gamer, like one of my favorite hobbies. But I used to think of Roblox as like a discount knockoff Minecraft, but that's because I hadn't played it. Like, it was just my perception of what it was. So I decided, because the children I'm one-to-one with, they loved it, and I'd usually try and get an idea of the sort of things that they love and work with that to ingratiate them to doing something within the curriculum, And so I thought, okay, I'm going to learn this. I'm maybe going to get a few spreadsheets. I don't know. I wasn't going to go that far with it. On top of that, by the way, worth mentioning, any given class in any school in the UK, and I'm sure it's the same in the US, pretty much most of the children are playing Roblox, and half of the class is playing it religiously, like every day.
Mm-hmm.
So you come to realize that it's a big thing, but I just assumed it was just something similar to Minecraft. So I decided to play it and realized very quickly that it's actually a huge platform of quite literally millions of games, many of which are made by the players themselves. You can make your own games on Roblox without any budget at all. So I realized then that maybe I could make a little game for my students. I can make a little something, and I don't know, it's just something to do with math, because that's typically one of the subjects that they struggle most with. I love math, always have, but it's just one of those things that if they don't feel like they're good enough at it, or they get anxious from previous experiences, then they just don't engage, and it's really hard to get them into that. So I thought, here's a lovely way of making math fun, but rather than making math fun like I would typically do in my lessons, which isn't necessarily related to something they already like, here's something they're already having fun with, so I will make it fun on there.
Mm-hmm.
And it just spiraled from there.
Wow.
Yeah, there's so much about that game.
Yeah. So has it continuously, from where it started to where it began, has it evolved a lot?
Yes.
Yeah.
So first of all, it's probably worth mentioning that Roblox is trying to shed its reputation for not really being much about education, and they're having a really big push for that kind of Roblox education section. So they're trying to integrate things to do with classrooms. They're trying to integrate more like safeguarding measures that schools can take, that can apply to different games and whatnot. They're giving funding to different companies, which hopefully one day I'll be able to apply for, because I'm not quite there yet with what I've got. But like educational companies specific to make games on their system. They've got a learn and explore sort, which is basically like a page of games which is specifically educational. Which again, I hope to go on to eventually. So they're doing loads of stuff in that sphere, especially since the end of last year, the start of this year. So it's kind of like, taking on its own momentum. So when I got involved in this around about maybe September, October to begin with, and I just kind of went on Roblox Studio, where you make games on, I thought, I'll just spend an hour or two on this, just making a game, making a little obby. Obstacle course. It's the simplest type of game on Roblox, typically because that's what kids go for as well. Like they if they can play a simple game, they try and make a simple game. Is what most creators on Roblox start off with anyway. And I ended up spending pretty much all of my free time and some of my time that wasn't free making this game. It was just so. Oh man, it was so good to do. Like I'm trying to think of a better word than just good, but it was exhilarating, because I was making this game, and then I was showing my students, and they were loving it. Like just the sheer fact that I was making something on Roblox, it didn't matter if it was even any good. It blew their mind that a teacher was on this platform, whereas normally a teacher wouldn't have a clue about it. Maybe they'll put like a little Roblox character on their worksheet, like I was originally planning, and oh wow, it's Roblox, but here's a teacher literally making games on it, And so eventually I released my game, which was the Math Obby times tables, because I wanted to specifically focus on the times tables, because that's what my students at that specific point were doing. Because I forgot to mention, I tutor less and less more recently with one-to-ones, more like classes now, because it's hard to find the time to do one-to-ones with everything that's going on. But I had one-to-one math tutors as well, and so it was the SEND work and they were all struggling with their times tables. So I thought I'll make the game on that. So started playing it, realized there were a few things wrong with it. They point out a few things to me. I continuously edit. I then took on a very talented developer who lives in the US. That's when I realized as well that basically pretty much 99% of the people I ended up working with in Roblox from that point onwards were under the age of 18. That it's just this whole huge ecosystem. They like literally they all have their profiles on Fiverr. Typically their parents have set it up for them. They're making pretty good money in a lot of ways. Some people aren't, but most of them are under the age of 18, and they're incredibly skilled. incredibly skilled. Shout out to Hazuri. It's not his actual name, this is his username. But yeah, 15 years old in the United States, and I don't think I could have made these games without him. Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
It's, well, to blow your mind even more, that just to kind of go off on a tangent, there's a game similar to mine which gave me a lot of inspiration, and I had a chat with the kid who made it, Obido, a username again. He's 15 now, but when he made the game he was 13, and it's now got, I think, 17 million views. It's like the most popular game, math game.
That's
on
amazing.
There. He's featured on Time magazine. This kid, he's done really well for himself. So there's so much
great.
to it. Like, I could go off a tangent on purely the creators alone that aren't me. But yeah, I very quickly realized that there are, like, it made me feel a bit old, but I get over that quickly. Because I'm only 29, and there's kids like half my age that are doing these amazing things.
Yeah.
But it's very impressive. So I hired that developer. I hired a few people, like modelers, to like help me with like more complicated tools and models and things in the game. And so then I released it on Roblox fully. I wasn't originally intending to when I first made it, but then it quickly became a thing where it's like, well, why not? Let's see where we can go with this. I mean, to this point, it's got about 47,000 views, I believe, right now.
Nice.
So it's doing all right.
Yeah.
And it's got a lot of kind of traction with parents, especially homeschooling parents over in the US.
Makes sense.
Which I didn't really know much about homeschooling either until it came up. And like, it makes sense because often with I mean, it's not just homeschoolers, mind you. Like, generally it's a hard thing to get children interested in math, especially if they've been burnt before in some way by another teacher being mean to them, or just not being helped enough, or not being understood as to why specifically they don't understand that math, whatever.
Right.
It's hard to get them interested, but then along comes a game on Roblox, which they already love, and it incorporates lots and lots of different ways that the games work typically on Roblox into a math game to make it fun. And all of a sudden they're running with it, and it's great. Not to mention, when I say to them that if they complete the course in my lessons, then I'll give them Robux, which is the in-game currency, and that really gets
You're just meeting them where they are. You talk about incentive.
Can you talk a little bit about, if you were going to explain to me how the game works, like what would you do, or what do you do with the times tables?
For all of us old people that aren't playing Roblox.
I just assume you all know. so like I mentioned earlier, it's that, at least for now, I'm planning to make different games, more complicated games to do with math in the future, that also are more like esoteric, like they're kind of not just a very direct version of what I'm making. So I'm making obbies. And an obby is an obstacle course. And typically in an obstacle course, which has nothing to do with math, you would just do the different stages of the obstacle course until the end. If there even is an end, because you can procedurally generate them now. So they would just continue to be created, new different ones, until you stop playing. So the differences with these is that in between each stage, there are 3 doors. And there's a question above the door, above the doors.
Okay.
Each door has an answer, and you walk through the right door for what the question is. So you select multiple choice. So I could have decided not to do multiple choice, but it kind of gives the children who are really struggling, at least some chance to eventually get the right answer, rather than just give me the answer.
Right.
But then it also allows the children who are much more skilled at it to just kind of blow through it if they need to, if they want to get to the harder ones. So the original game, I had 20 easy stages, 20 medium stages, and 10 hard stages. And with the 20 easy and medium stages, they typically wouldn't have the questions get all that much harder. They do progress a little bit, but there's only so many times tables you can ask. It's more making the stages themselves, the obstacles, harder. Now, one thing that works really well is that if they mess up in the obstacle course, so a particular stage, it doesn't just reset them to the course, it resets them to the previous question. So each time they mess up, they have to answer that question again. So they get that nice bit of repetition in as well. But next to each of those stages, especially in the easy and medium ones, I'll have a little tip board. So like some sort of thing related to the lessons that I teach. It'll say something like about platforming or a quick little tip or trick to help them with that question. So, if they need it, they can use it. Then the 10 stages in hard, there's 2 questions per stage. So if they mess up on the hard ones, which normally they would because they're harder, they have to answer 2 questions before getting to the stage. So, and all of those ones are the harder times tables as well. So that it kind of enforces them practicing the harder ones most.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of what I went for at first.
Okay.
And then I had I learned a lot from feedback from the children that were playing, from the parents, from the developers who were saying because I originally designed the game first, but a developer would have gone about it differently to be able to incorporate lots of other stuff. So the new one, the math hobby.
Okay.
So I'm going to go beyond just times tables now. So I've kind of named it what I would like it to be for all of the math. It has lots of extra features. So it's got now 10 stages of easy, 10 of medium, 10 of hard. The tips come up for every single question, but they can decide whether they want it selected or not. It comes up before each question, so they can either have it come up or not. They can reset the stage if they like, because it's done by checkpoints. So remember where your progress is in each one. The questions will change every hour on the hour. So it's never have the same questions in front of you. So do the stages as well. So it's taken from like a pool of questions and stages. So it's never the same every time they play, every day.
Yeah, that's cool.
There's time trials as well. So there's an easy trial, a medium trial, and a hard trial, trying to be in keeping with the difficulty, so it makes more sense to the younger children. So easy time trials, they get an unlimited amount of lives, so they could just mess up as many times as they like. Medium, they get 3 lives, and hard, they get 1. So, getting on that hard board is, it took me a while, and I'm the creator, basically. So to get on my own board, I'm very proud of my time. It's already been rinsed by 2 of my students. So I don't see myself staying on that board for long, to be honest, but I'm there.
That's good, though. That's good.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So there's that. But then one of the main things that I like to incorporate in my older one, and I learned the most about, is how to make them want to keep playing. So unlockables basically is a big aspect of Roblox games typically, but also typically they have to pay in-game currency for it, which can only be obtained in a few ways, like for example real money, or if they win it like in a competition from me, that kind of thing. So what I had to figure out was what would make them want to keep playing and practicing their times tables, but at the same time I refuse to charge them any Robux. Like the games are completely free. Basically.
Okay. Great. We love that.
So it was one of those things where I see games and they're trying to pump you full of ads and unlock this flying carpet for 800 Robux, £8. And it's like, it's rubbish, So I've basically given them lots of things in other games they'd have to pay for, but for free. So it's that kind of thing to keep them in. So at first I just offered them a jetpack in the old one. It's a really good jetpack, actually. Because in a lot of games they'd have to pay for fuel, whereas mine is unlimited fuel as well. So it's that kind of thing.
It's like a magical jetpack.
Yeah. It's basically never have to refuel, basically.
Love that.
Never have to refuel. And that's basically, I had like a couple of other bits like slides and boats and that kind of thing. But it was only as far as I could go with my developing skills. So having then hired on another developer, so I've got 2 now. Shout out to RJ. They basically have helped me with lots of other unlockables. So now there's also some angel wings and butterfly wings that they can unlock at the really high levels.
So fancy.
So really, really big thing for them to have wings, if you have to fly around and get to places in the map that others can't at the lower levels.
Yeah.
Pets. So I've got 2 types of bunny rabbit, a cat, a dog, a chicken, a rat, a llama, a dragon, a unicorn, and I'm forgetting one, but I can't remember.
No. Kara's going to need you to add a sheep to that.
There you go. See, I add them all to the list. There's penguins, there's bats, there's all sorts of stuff I'm gonna put in. Like it was just like the initial 10.
Okay.
But I tell you what, every child comes at me with some strange new animal, like a aardvark and an eel. An eel. I was like, okay.
Great pet.
Yeah.
Eel would be.
I know, right? Yeah. So there's all sorts of pets I'm putting in there, but pets are a huge draw to Roblox games.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be.
Typically have to pay,
whereas
again, all free. Trails, which are basically like these kind of colors that come behind you when you run. It's almost like 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 a unicorn might be going through the air, like a rainbow coming out of it. It's like that kind of thing. So yeah, all this kind of stuff in the game, and so much more planned. But basically, it's like they would do the times tables, and they get XP for each of the times tables questions they complete. That XP goes towards leveling, and when they reach certain levels, they unlock all these things. So the more times tables they do, the more they get.
Very cool.
That's awesome.
Like, yeah,
I can see where that'd be really motivating.
Certainly seems to be.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the crux of the games. That's how they operate. There's so many other things I've got planned in like the next phases of development, but that's the basis of them. That's how they run.
That's really cool. I'm like, I want to play.
I know. I was just thinking we're going to clear our schedules for the rest of the week. Yeah.
I'm like, okay, maybe I should venture into the Roblox arena because I've only ever watched and never played. So
you'll soon be lost in it. There's outside of the math, there's so many other games, like, not even just math related, but like educationally, but even outside of that, like I got caught up in like a zombie game all night last night. So back to my Call of Duty days. So yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
I know I spoke about the game a lot, but like, do you want me to talk about the math within that? Kind of the more nitty gritty?
Yeah, if you want to. I was also going to ask about gamification, like...
that's the kind of thing, yeah. So, I mean, speaking about the gamification, it kind of comes hand in hand with how I apply the specific way of learning math to the games, basically, because there's one way I could go about it, which is quite simply repetition of. But I try to get past that, especially with the tips that I offer throughout, so that I cover multiple ways of learning for the children, because a lot of the time you'll find that the methods of learning the times tables as an example, but this transfers to many different topics within math, especially within the Key Stage 2 curriculum, which is basically your grade 2 to 5. For us is year 3 to 6. You'll find that many of the methods are about rote learning and just recalling all of their times tables, which can be virtually impossible when done in a traditional way for a lot of children. I mean, if I were to hazard a guess, you probably got taught your times tables, same as me, by just constant repetition.
Yep.
Like, again
repetition and timed test.
Yeah, exactly. And
high
and
stress.
I also has yeah, exactly. Very high stress. And so I would also hazard a guess that could at least, maybe if you don't remember their names, but you can think of at least a few students in your class, if not more, being left behind, or just saying like, oh, I hate math, especially around that level.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's a huge problem. Like, there's so many things that are done later on, like in the secondary age of math, where they're trying to get back into being interested. But if you don't get them then, at the moment that they start to not like math, then you're fighting a losing battle. Because it's all about math anxiety. It's kind of a buzzword, I guess, or buzz phrase, but it's a very real thing. Their self-confidence just drops off a cliff, and it's hard to get them back. So the fact that times tables are also very important to numeracy as a whole, and it falls into so many different topics, like how it had fractions and algebra and the area of a shape. If you don't catch them in the times tables, then they're also going to struggle on all these other topics. So that's why I focused on that first, because it just seemed like the best one to go for. So it kind of led me to think of ways that I can make things much less anxiety inducing. This was in tandem with when I was starting to try and think of how I could incorporate Roblox, because I realized this would be a really good way of stopping this. So I started reading a book, because I was trying to find specific academic ways of doing this and try and then apply it to games. And I found a book called The Trouble with Maths, A Practical Guide to Helping Learners with Numeracy Difficulties, by Steve Chin. And it was very enlightening, because especially the part where he talks about two distinct thinking styles of math, inchworms and grasshoppers, and how that relates to developmental math. Basically, they're not exactly two separate camps of thinking. They're more like two extremes on the ends of a continuum, with everyone else somewhere in the middle of it. Now, hopefully, I don't get this horribly wrong, but I'm going to try and summarize it, because there's like a multi-chapter section on all of these things. So I'm going to try and summarize it. Inchworm learners, they tend to work things out step by step, whereas grasshopper thinkers might provide the correct answer without any working out. They'll just jump straight to the answer, and a teacher might hear, for example, I just knew. That kind of response where you probably heard it before, where they can't really explain how they knew, but they just did. And that was very much me when it came to math. Whereas you'll have children with the inchworms that like to do it very methodically and slowly and like bit by bit by bit by bit, stage by incremental stage until they get to their final understanding. However, that can then often lead to being seen as slower. They could be a fantastic mathematician, but because that's their way of learning, they are perceived as slow and they fall behind in class and they're not really kept up to, the standards of other grasshoppers who might not even be that great a mathematician. It's just how they think.
Yeah.
So grasshoppers like to deal with big ideas, don't really want to bother with the details as well sometimes. And that's the thing, the math curriculums are often biased towards one method of thinking style or another, typically the grasshoppers. So children on the other end of that continuum inevitably fall through the cracks. So I was trying to figure out of how I can meet both thinking styles, because obviously I don't want to just focus then on the inchworms. I want to try and cover it all. So when it comes to that, it's talking about the grasshopper skill of breaking down and building up numbers. It's very important for inchworm learners to be able to use that, so you kind of just try and incorporate that. So, for example, with times tables, it's like using the easier times tables to work out the harder times tables. Because as a grasshopper, they have a question 12 times 8 put in front of them, and they just go, "Oh, it's 96." That was easy. And inchworm will be thinking okay, right, so 8, add A, add A, add A, and they'll do it every time, and they'll do it really slowly because that's the method they learn, and they want to be sure they got the right answer, and they can't remember exactly how they did it without doing that. Just adding it one by one each multiple. So what you could do, so 12 times 8, you could break it down instead to each of its multiples. So inside 12 times 8, you would have 10 multiples of 8. So you could do 10 times 8, which using commutative property is 8 times 10, which, as I explained to a lot of learners who are shocked, like, "Oh, I know that. It's 8 times 10 is 80. Well, yeah, it's the same thing." So you talk about commutative property usually before that point. But then, so they've got that, and they're already most of the way there. So all they've got to do then is add 2 more 8s, and they've got to the answer 96. 80 add 8, 88, 88 add 8, 96. And it's helping them practice how to apply that to each individual times table sum, especially, obviously, the harder ones where you need it the most. So when it comes to trying to figure it out, it's thinking just of the amount there are. So often I would have them doing the skip count method on their hands. So they've got 7, and so there's 5 multiples within that 7, and then you just got to add more 2. If it's 9 times a number, so 9 times 7, they take that 10, and then they would just take away one of them, and they're immediately there as well. So it's helping them break that down. Within the games, I incorporate that by giving that to one of the tips if they want the tips open. So I have that description in there. But then for the children who don't want the tips and they just know the answer, or they want to just figure that out themselves however they like, they can just attempt the doors themselves. So that's generally how I try and apply it to the games, basically.
Yeah. Well, I'm like, now you have my brain thinking.
She's
I'm
absorbing.
I wonder which one I am.
Yeah. Depends how you picked up math before, I guess.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, hang on.
If you thought of yourself as a very methodical learner and took things nice and slow, then you probably were an inchworm.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just raced through it, you were seen as top of your class, typically also because the curriculum would be tailored more towards you, then you were most likely a grasshopper. But the thing is that like I said, they're two extremes. So you could just be smack bang in the middle, and you could make the best of both, basically.
Yeah.
She's going to think about that all night.
I know. Like food for thought now.
Yeah. I read the book. There's so much more to it as well.
It's really interesting.
Really good book.
I guess I'm kind of curious too, like when you took your games to your students, what kinds of, things did you notice, or like, were there any success? I know you said they really enjoyed them, but like, are there any specific like successes that it was impressionable on you? Like, oh my gosh, this is so cool that like,
it kind of goes beyond just the simple enjoyment of it, because certainly they did enjoy it. But one of the main things when it comes to gamification is the fact that when you gamify something, you are inherently making it fun, and you can see it almost as a fun schooling approach. It's something I've been learning much more about recently when it comes to the homeschooling approach. Fun schooling is just kind of like a subcategory of that, but it can be applied even to children that aren't being homeschooled, of course, like after school or even within the school. But just making education as fun as possible and therefore as engaging as possible, because what child doesn't like to have fun, is just such a fantastic way of teaching. Because the more fun you make that game, therefore the more fun you make that learning, the more likely they are to not only want to learn that topic but continue learning. It's fostering that love for learning and that love for whichever topic it may be, especially a topic like math, which is typically hated. I hate's a strong word, but you hear the word hate.
Well, it is. I think it's love or hate. Yeah. If you ask kids, there's not too many that are indifferent.
Yeah, exactly. And I've had quite a few students who quite literally have turned around from saying I hate math or point blank refusing to do math to not only wanting to play my game, but being much more receptive to doing math outside of my game. Having heard that from their parents, having heard that from their parents from their teachers through their parents, and just their whole approach to math being just completely reversed because they can see it as much more fun.
When they're getting all those little successes as they move through and building those foundational skills that are going to translate as they progress through math. So I think it's great. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And then I guess on top of that, the gamification side of it, like you can make it, I don't like to use the word addictive. Because that's got obviously negative connotations to it, but it's like it makes it much more likely that they want to continue doing that topic, so whereas some games, obviously, when there's got no educational foundation to it, a lot of the time, like a simulator or tycoon or whatever, where they're just trying to make as much money off you as possible. But with games like that, you can really bring in those aspects of the game which makes them want to keep playing it, but make it an educational thing, which is really nice. So like those unlockables in my game, typically you'd find those in a game that's trying to make them keep playing for the wrong reasons, whereas for this, especially because I've made them free, it's making them want to keep playing for the right reasons. So that kind of thing,
which I think is important, like the motivation factor.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you find that you encounter parents or teachers that are hesitant to adopt gamification sort of activities because they're afraid?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That if it's fun, it's not going to have educational value? I mean, are you running into that or?
Yeah. Certainly not once they start playing, but
once they actually do it. Yeah.
Once they start playing, it's like, oh wow, okay, right. So I'm trying to make YouTube tutorials and things on my YouTube channel, Brainy Spinach Math.
Okay, perfect.
Where basically not only are we doing live streams, so edutainment live streams, where their children could take part in games and competitions where they earn Robux for be able to complete the obby, or depending on how fast they complete it, maybe complete it first or second or third, and they'll earn more. So that kind of thing. Often when that's witnessed by parents, they'll realize that like just how good it is to get them more interested in math again, because not only will they take part in that live stream, but then they're like, I'm going to win next time, and I'll see them playing like a few hours a day.
I'm going to go practice my times table.
I'm going to go practice them, because they want to win, and that's great. But one of the main barriers to it is the whole screen time aspect, and I'll often have parents saying like, I would want to join your course, I want my child to play your game, but I try and keep them away from screens altogether. And the thing is, like, everything in moderation, just as with all things which could potentially be negative, as long as you moderate that usage, I think it's absolutely fine to allow children to play games. Because when I was younger, like I was allowed to play games hours and hours and hours a day, and I mean, it's probably part of the reason I'm wearing glasses. It was great, and obviously a very good gamer, I like to think. But yeah, like I would say I was certainly probably allowed far more than I'd ever allowed my own children to play. But everything in moderation, a couple of hours, a few hours on the weekend, maybe an hour or two after school, but no more than that. There's all sorts of other things that they can enjoy.
Yeah. When I think there's different types of screen time.
Yeah, like TV.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Depends on how engaged they are. Yeah, if they're in front of the TV.
Right. I mean, if they're engaged and they're thinking and they're actually involved in what's happening on the screen and it's a positive experience.
Yeah.
It's totally different than setting them in front of a TV and watching whatever's on, or just watching, the stuff they watch on YouTube where it's like, oh, we're watching another kid play with a toy, that type of thing. I mean,
yeah. And again, that's the thing, like, that's why part of why I want to go on YouTube as well, because, there's that whole edutainment aspect, but actually properly educational. Right, but at the same time they can be engaged, because you'll have the YouTube live stream on one screen and then they're playing Roblox on their phone and they're like, like trying to follow on what I'm doing whilst playing themselves, and it's really like exhilarating for them, and it's math. So it's really good from that perspective.
Do you have a tech tip or trick that you could share with us?
Sure. So I guess one of the things I quickly realized is that when you're trying to integrate education into Roblox, or any game for that matter, because Roblox isn't the only one out there, it's just the one that I chose because it's so massively popular, especially with my students. But when you're trying to integrate anything, any topic, educational wise, to Roblox, it doesn't need to be done by just you. And I didn't accept that until I was a good maybe 2 months into my journey. I had a massive pitfall when it came to creating my games, where I didn't realize for the first month of creating them that there are such things called Lua viruses within Roblox Studio. They can't affect anything outside of Roblox Studio, but if you use a lot of the models from their toolbox, which other people have created, people that you just don't know who they are, they'll have put a script into it that, for example, will replicate itself. And so when you play the game, suddenly everything's on fire, or some weird bug creature will just chase you around the map and knock you off the side, all these kind of things. And when the first time I made it, I made my game from mostly tools from that toolbox. So the first
of course, because you would.
Yeah, I just thought, oh, this is great. How nice. They've made all these lovely, cool things for me. Yeah, and there's some really cool things in there, some amazing slides and different things. I was like, oh, it's great, and then I tried to play it, and that bug thing was chasing me and everything was on fire, and I kept teleporting from one side of it to the other, and it was falling me off the map, and it was just all going crazy. It's like, what has happened? I thought it was me, like with my basic script knowledge, that I'd screwed up somehow.
You're like, how did I code this giant bug?
How did I make this thing?
How did I do
Maybe it's part of something else, There were sharks as well. I put sharks in the game, but I didn't realize they wouldn't just swim around placidly. They'd come for me from miles away. So, and it was gutting to realize that. But the thing is, it was because I was new, and I just, your typical developer just knew that, especially your developer who'd been with Roblox for years when that sort of thing first became an issue. So it was just a known thing, but obviously not to me. So, and I had to remake the entire game because I did like this virus checker, and there was literally like 3,000 viruses. It was just impossible.
Because you were like, we'll do this virus checker and we'll figure out these couple spots where these viruses, and we'll just remove them.
You just download McAfee and it removes the
it'll be fine.
It found them, it removed them, but they'd all come back, and it was just a nightmare. So
my God.
I had to make the entire thing from scratch. And I remember,
I'm just like envisioning this in my mind.
Absolute nightmare. Like I spent
like chaos.
Yeah,
anarchy.
I spent a whole week of a school holiday, just focused on nothing else but making this game again. So I was like, I'm not spending this much time doing it again. And obviously I did it with all my own tools. But that was when I started to realize, okay, I can't take these models from the toolbox anymore, but I have no idea how to make them myself.
Right.
And so I started to get in touch with people on Fiverr, on the Discord. They started to tell me, like, we can help you, but you probably want an actual developer. And that's where I came across Azuri on Fiverr. And he was instrumental in helping me with the things that I just beyond me, like building up a rebirth system. It's basically like a leveling system, but you like restart the game with a higher point level, that kind of thing. And the modelers, like they started to say, well, you could put this in it and this in it and this in it, and things that I hadn't thought of. Then I started to talk to an animator. Then I realized you can get translators. Then there were so many different roles that people could play. They're incredibly skilled. I now have a team. I now have a Brainy Spinach math development team. And yeah, there was no way I could have made the game anywhere near as good as I feel it now is, and my students certainly feel it, without a whole team around me. That's not to say I have to pay all of their salaries or anything like that. It's just like on a contracted basis, you know, I need a little thing, they'll do that bit for me. But like my team is like there for me when I need to put different bits in. So yeah, like don't feel like you have to do it all yourself. Accept help and hire help, because there's so much that you will end up wanting to incorporate. You can't hope to do it all by yourself. Especially if you're trying to do a full-time job. Nightmare. Part of why I took it on full-time this in the end, because I didn't have enough time. But by that point then I was obviously making enough to be able to support that. So yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us, Jon. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with, or our listeners with?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I guess the main thing is I want these games to be instrumental in bringing thousands, if not millions, of children back from the brink of hating mathematics, and to actively nurture a love for the subject that carries right on into adulthood. So part of that is all of the effort that I'm putting into it, but a huge part of it, as I mentioned a few times before, is all of the advice that I've gotten, not just from my students, but from parents and from other educators. So any advice or support I can receive from anyone listening, whether it's how to improve the aspects of maths that I'm bringing into the games themselves, to try and make this project work in the way I'm hoping it will. The more I can receive from that, the more likely it is I can make this all happen. So any support or advice I can receive from your listeners would be fantastic.
Awesome. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our discussion today. If you like our podcast, please don't forget to subscribe to get notified when new episodes are released.
For more information about our podcast and to access links and resources referenced in this episode, check us out at fortheloveofedtech.org.